So on that note, I'd like to introduce Julian Alston. Now, most people in this room, and certainly it's a conference like this, Julian needs a little introduction. On the off chance that there is someone in the room who doesn't know Julian, I'll just emphasise that he is a professor with the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics at the University of California in Davis. Julian's background, I won't go all the way back, Julian, to growing up in northern Victoria, etc., but we will take some credit here in Victoria, given that you were chief economist with what's now the Department of Primary Industries prior to moving on to your more international stage. And since that time, of course, Julian's had both an academic and applied research interest in the broader area of agricultural markets, agricultural policies, and this whole question around the importance of support to RD&E. Julian's presentation is a today persistent underinvestment puzzle, and I'm sure in Julian's inimitable fashion this will be entertaining, although there's one aspect I'm going to pick you up on right at the end, because the editorial panel can edit something out on one of your slides, Julian. So just watch for this particular item on one of Julian's slides. Welcome, Julian.
Thanks, Clive. What do we do here? Shouldn't expect to break down so soon in the process. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Bruce, for convening this event and inviting me. And thanks also, Bruce, for your leadership in this area in developing this national framework for RD&E, which may come to be known as the KEFID plan, after the Kerrin plan. I wanted to motivate these remarks with a couple of points. One is we've been seeing some fairly significant shifting patterns of support for agricultural RD&E around the world. In particular, we're seeing a slowdown in spending growth in the rich countries, including Australia. And total spending growth is slowing down. It's not negative growth everywhere, but the rate of positive growth is slowing down in total spending. And the way that money is spent is changing. So the share being spent on farm productivity enhancement is going down. And we've got very good data on the US where we've looked at that in detail, and it's quite striking. We've got anecdotal evidence that the same thing's happening in Australia, Canada, and so on. Not so in Brazil and China and India. So there's, even though it's slowing down the world as a whole, some places are ramping up their investment, so there's a shifting balance in the world. Same things happening in agricultural productivity, and possibly not by coincidence, it's the places that are ramping up their investments that are also continuing to have relatively high rates of productivity growth in agriculture, whereas the rich countries, like Australia, the US, Canada, and so on, they're having a substantial slowdown in their rate of productivity growth. Again, still positive, but much slower. Phil Party gave an address about that last night, and we've got this book that's available for free on the web if you want to learn more about that. Not more than what Phil said. Phil said more than is in that book. There's other evidence about the rates of return to agricultural R&D that I'm opting not to spend a lot of time on that today, but just we all kind of understand that evidence is out there. Some of us are sceptical about it, but there's this other books available. It's not as cheap as the first one, but it'll tell you everything you need to know about that subject. I think even the Productivity Commission accepts that the rates of return to agricultural R&D are very high, and they don't necessarily take the further step that the rest of us tend to take to say that's evidence of underinvestment. In spite of all the institutional arrangements we have, in spite of having matching support from the government with levies, there's still not enough being spent. There's too little. And so there's a paradox. We've got this evidence of an underinvestment that pretty much we accept is persuasive. Well, we might not accept that it's precisely right, but the conclusion is pretty persuasive. The implication is we should be ramping up the investment. the policy decision is to withdraw in many places in favour of some other investment which hasn't got exactly the same kind of empirical support. So that's a puzzle. Another puzzle is in the Australian context, we've got different institutional arrangements from most other places. We have got the levy arrangement. The theory that's implicit in the Productivity Commission's work leads to the conclusion that you set up a levy system and that should solve the problem. In many instances that solves the problem. The industry's incentives are sufficient, they'll generate enough funding, they'll drive the marginal return down to a competitive rate, and so we won't have the underinvestment problem. But our evidence here, even the Productivity Commission says the rate of return is very high, we're not doing enough. Okay, so there's a paradox. Around the world this same paradox exists. Everywhere we see this evidence, very high rates of return, and if anything we see governments backing away from funding research and collective organisations of industry not stepping forward. Even in the United States, where our evidence shows a benefit cost ratio of 20 to 1 at the margin, when farmers go to Washington, they don't ask for more research funding, they ask for more subsidies, for which the return's only 80 cents to the dollar to farmers. Strange. So I'm going to talk today about the economics of levy-funded research. And I'm going to talk about it specifically in the context of what I call commodity collective goods. So a lot of agricultural research, the beneficiaries are just the producers and consumers of the commodities concerned. They're not public goods. So we're going to argue about a market failure. It's a collective goods market failure, not a national public goods market failure. The right instrument to correct that probably is a collective goods instrument like a levy. But we can address these market failures in many ways. Ways to fund these activities include private funding, national, state and local government revenues, voluntary commodity levies. I have them in Canada, where they take a levy, but it's voluntary, you can ask for your money back. It turns out you can't fund a lot of research that way. They only set the levies pretty low. Or mandatory commodity levies, like what we have here. Once we agree to do so, it's no longer voluntary for individuals. We call them hypothecated taxes. But we let the industries choose the rates, and I'm going to talk about that later. I want to talk about efficiency and equity issues related to these choices, and when we talk about efficiency, sometimes we're a bit vague and we're not sure about we're maximising net benefits for the nation as a whole, or industry, or farmers, and sometimes they're not the same idea. I'll talk about the nation, really. But if we let farmers choose, they'll be maximising benefits for not necessarily everybody. We talk about different elements of efficiency. So Bruce was talking about how to design a system that would achieve these kinds of purposes, like we want to minimise the total cost of a given amount of funding, we want to get the total budget right. Efficiency requires having the total amount of money right, raising it in the least cost way, allocating it well among projects and programs, and managing the resources efficiently. And then there are equity considerations where you talk about in terms of who benefits and how much. And there's a vertical distribution of benefits up and down the marketing chain, whether they're farmers, input suppliers, processors or consumers. And then there's a horizontal distribution of benefits. So when we do some research, we'll shift things around, and if prices change, you get a distribution up and down the chain. Within a given level of the system, farmers who adopt will benefit. Farmers who don't adopt obviously won't benefit directly, and they could be worse off if they've had to pay a levy or if the price has gone down. These distributional outcomes will differ depending on what kind of research we're doing. And then the levy itself is distributed up and down the marketing chain by the same mechanism that distributes the benefits from research. So this is, I have to do this, I'm sorry. This is supply and demand model. So this is a familiar model to many of us. So we're talking about research that shifts supply down in parallel by an amount K per unit. And that generates benefits for both producers and consumers. And the benefits for producers are that area P1, B, C, D, and consumers get P0, A, B, P1. Okay. Alternatively, if we did a pivotal supply shift that achieved the same impact on quantity produced and price, the consumer benefits are still the same. The price changes the same, consumer benefits are the same. The total benefits are half as much. Producer benefits are clearly smaller. Producers might lose in this case. So here's a story. The nature of the research determines who benefits in this case and how much. We can compare these things. So this is as we increase the levy, the total benefits to the nation go up, and there's a maximum. So that's the optimum for the society. For a parallel supply shift, it turns out if we do the producer benefits, the producer optimum is the same as the national one. So if we let producers choose the amount of levy, and they wanted to maximise their benefits, they'd incidentally maximise national benefits. It's incentive compatible. This model is implicit in recommendations from people like the Productivity Commission who say, you create the levy system and the world will look after itself. You don't need to do anything further. It assumes a particular type of outcome. If we did a pivotal supply shift instead, the total benefits are half as much, and the producer optimum is different from the national optimum. Producers choosing will choose to do less research that would maximise national benefits in that case. So there's just one simple case we can demonstrate easily how the assumption that it's incentive compatible doesn't apply in this case. Now, we don't know much about the nature of supply shifts. This is something that's beggared the profession for ever since Linda and Jared bothered us with it. But in a lot of cases, people inadvertently make an assumption about this. So a representative firm model or an industry model implicitly builds multiplicative shifts into it. So people who use models and do that to them, they find particular results. The results they're finding are the results that you get from assuming multiplicative shifts. But we don't know what can happen, and in many cases, a parallel shift is as plausible, and often it's sensible to assume that, and we do. In Australia, it may not matter so much. If you're a price taker in world markets, as Australia is for many commodities, then it doesn't matter whether it's pivotal, multiplicative, parallel, or whatever else. 100% of the benefits go to producers anyway. So you've got another story there that says that if Australia's a price taker, it doesn't matter. If you set up a levy system that producers choose, they'll choose the amount that maximises their benefits will maximise national benefits because they're the only beneficiaries.